A 1977 study by anthropologist Rebekah Senanayake found that over 90% of societies across the world have some form of altering their state of consciousness, with these states often access to induce healing or profound transformations. In this presentation, I share my research in the Peruvian Amazon within a long-standing traditional knowledge system that uses some of the strongest psychoactives known to humankind. Specifically, this presentation focuses on the methods through which altered states of consciousness are accessed, how these profound states of consciousness are integrated with regular human life, and because the psychoactive substances in Amazonia originate from plants, the complex interspecies processes of exchange that are required for a successful integration. To analyze these points, I draw on ritual theory, specifically Van Gennep's rites of passage, Turner's communitas, Durkheim's collective effervescence, and Douglas's purity and cleanliness. I trace the process of interspecies communication with altered states of consciousness in a ritualistic procedure known as dieta. To situate myself as the researcher in the field and to provide context to the lens through which my findings are analysed, I will first provide a personal background with my motivations to undertake this research. I visited the Peruvian Amazon for the first time 10 years ago. I had heard about the Amazon when I was 10 years old from my uncle, who had just returned from a trip there. Towering above me at 6 foot tall, I marvelled at his stories, but what captivated me most was his snake bites. He showed me his arm and told me that for each type of venom, there was a specific plant that could cure it. Of course, this was documented by the father of ethnobotany, Richard Evans Schultes, in 1972, but I did not know that at the time. Years later, when I finally had the opportunity to visit South America and remembered my intrigue with the Amazon, that was the first time I tried ayahuasca, and I did that without reading anything about the plant beforehand. What captivated me most about these initial experiences with ayahuasca, apart from it being a fantastic medicine, was the maestro's expertise, technical knowledge, and ritual literacy in navigating the ceremonies. They encouraged me to talk to the plant, to develop a relationship with it, and I was intrigued by a way of being that allowed for this sort of intimate connection to develop across species. I returned to the Amazon after my first visit of 1 month to spend a year in the jungle, avocationally tracing the plants and practices. In total, I met and drank with 11 different Bora, Quemesta, Lamista Quechua, Shipibo, and Mestizo maestros. And these were all maestros at that point working with local populations. At this time, I met my now primary field informant, Don Roberto, a Lamista Quechua maestro, a group suggested by Torres in 2018 and Breivik de Mori in 2011 to have the second oldest ayahuasca practice. Over 4 trips, I've spent 27 months in the field closely working with expert-level traditional knowledge practitioners, and in 2019, I was invited to commence a formal apprenticeship with Roberto and became his first female student. This coincided with my undertaking of advanced degrees, and I decided to pursue a doctorate degree with the intention of using the 100,000 words of my dissertation to integrate my apprenticeship. I set myself the challenge that if I could write a dissertation about it with a co-developed research design with an expert-level traditional practitioner, coupled with an expert-level ethnographer and ritual theorist, then that would serve as my marker of a successful integration. So thank you very much to Breaking Convention and Peter for the opportunity to share this work with you today. Aside from psychoactive plants, I worked as a float tank specialist for a few years, and because of a very supportive work environment, I clocked over 400 hours in the tank, including long float experimentation with psychedelics. My focus during my work at this time was on set and setting, and the power of making my body quiet. Aside from that, I have extensive experience with other psychedelics and forms of meditation. However, the foundation for my explorations of other realms has come from ritual and practice, and that I have learnt from the plants, the expert-level traditional practitioners in the Amazon jungle, and my education in anthropology and cultural psychology. So as my practice with the plants continued, and as I listened more to the words of the maestros, I noticed a salient theme thread through, and that was if I wanted to learn, I had to learn how to listen to the plants. So this led to some of the leading questions of my dissertation. 3 of which I have shared with you here today, as they are of the most relevance to this presentation. In their essence, they are: how is interspecies communication enacted? What is the function of altered states of consciousness? And what are the functions of ritual? To do this research, I used a range of ethnographic methods under the broad umbrella of intuitive ethnography, and what Brigitte Bonisch-Brednik calls an ethnography of hunches. Ethnography is a method of conducting research and also the product of this research. It is laced with thick descriptions and vignettes developed through extended periods of participating in and observing the field site to take the reader on a journey, not just into the ritual or the practice, but into the cultural context within which this practice is situated. Intuitive ethnography, succinctly put, is a form of doing ethnography that follows hunches and feelings that cannot be easily put into words, although not impossible, as I discovered when I developed the ego dissolution scale for my master's dissertation. Intuitive ethnography allowed me to follow the rises and falls of the jungle in a harsh physical environment that's at the whim of nature. It also allowed for more subtle learnings that arose from the plants to be held within an academic framework, as I situated myself through autoethnography as a subject in my research process. I participated in over 100 ceremonies during my year of fieldwork for my doctoral degree, including multiple dietas. My participation in these ceremonies follows a long-standing trend of Amazonian ethnographers to take their field sites seriously and immerse themselves in the practices. For me, it allowed me to develop my relationship with the plants and observe the interspecies processes of exchange from the inside. I also used botanical field methods like jungle walks. However, instead of collecting scientific information, I observed how the maestros talked about relationships and anthropological take on these methods that John Francis Sobecki discusses in his 2018 conference presentation. The ethical frameworks I use for this project are the North Star Ethics page and the Guide for Working with Original Peoples. I selected my methods based on their compatibility with the worldview within which I was working to allow for multi-species voice and non-linear forms of knowledge transmission to come through. The narrative arc that I will be following for the rest of my presentation is the rites of passage. Rites of passage is a term first coined by anthropologist Van Gennep in 1909. It was developed by Van Gennep looking at hundreds of rituals across the world to identify 3 transitions that occur when profound rituals are enacted. These three stages are separation, liminality, and reintegration. In his book, A Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell uses the metaphor of the hero to elaborate on Van Gennep's rites of passage, which is the diagram you see on the PowerPoint there. But before we get into rites of passage, let's talk about ritual. As I mentioned in the introduction, the ritual literacy of the maestros was one of the first things that drew me to traditional knowledge in Amazonia. And of course, this is also seen in many contexts across the world. Ritual is a collective act that reinforces the sacred-profane distinction and generates collective effervescence, that is, a heightened state that binds people together. It is also a model of and model for reality. In this definition, I have drawn on the work of Durkheim, Eliade, Goetz, and Turner, as these are some of the most applicable ritual theories to the study of altered states of consciousness and traditional knowledge. This definition asks some important questions. Who and what do we define as people? Especially in a worldview where plants can have personhood and agency, how are these people then able to talk? The macro ritual I will be tracing is the rite of passage, and within this there are micro rites of purification and rites of protection. So for the scope of this presentation, I will be focusing on liminality, post-liminality, and reincorporation in the rite of passage. It is within liminality that the most profound transformation is able to occur. As anthropologist Victor Turner says, during the intervening liminal period, the characteristics of the subject, the passenger, are ambiguous. They pass through a cultural realm that has few or none of the attributes of the past or coming state. Returning to my leading questions, which focus on the different dimensions of interspecies communication, I contend that the ambiguous attribute of the subject rises from dissolving the interspecies membrane between human and plant that is actioned through multiple rites of purification and rites of protection, ultimately requiring a human body that is clean and neutral to which the plants are able to establish a connection, which in turn acts to transmit knowledge, healing, insights, and more. So now I'm going to read you a short ethnographic vignette which describes an ayahuasca ceremony from my perspective. I invite you to close your eyes for this reading if you feel comfortable to do so. And to situate ourselves in the field site, we'll just take a few deep breaths and then listen to my voice to guide you. Each night, as the sun sets, the jungle comes alive. Frogs and crickets sing their songs, and fireflies speckle as extraterrestrial stardust while we walk to the farm. I'm excited to try the new brew for a few reasons. Firstly, ayahuasca tastes a lot better when it's fresh. Secondly, we've put different plants in this brew that I've not tried before. And lastly, of course, one should try their own medicine. Today's ceremony is on the land. We walk for an hour to get there, and after taking our seats, the chatter quietens and the ceremony slowly begins. Gently, the maestro whistles and blows tobacco into the bottle of ayahuasca. We are handed our servings for the night, salud, followed by a swish of water, and our journey is underway. Within half an hour, my visions gently start to creep in from the sides with tentacles of colour. The maestro starts softly whistling to open the ceremonial space, coaxing my visions out of their shell. They grow brighter and brighter until my field is full and I can feel the ayahuasca working its way down my gut. Feelings of nausea start to take over. It's not long before I vomit and act completely out of my control. I actually feel what's coming out. Unhelpful thoughts, patterns, foods, energy. I can feel the plant going through my system with laser-sharp precision to extract, expel, and extinguish. I now invite you to come back into the room and let's analyse that experience. So returning back to Van Gennep's rite of passage, we see a distinct marker in the separation of the subject from daily life. It is not within the confines of daily life where the environment is laced with triggers and temptations that profound transformation occurs. The profound transformation occurs as the subject separates themselves from their regular existence on physical, psychological, and metaphysical levels. In the present study, this is actioned by numerous rites of purification and protection, ranging from the invocation of a master plant tobacco through smoking, master trees through the wood which the tobacco is smoked, and plant baths. All of these micro-rituals combined lead the subject through the territorial passage to cross the liminal threshold. These transformations are catalyzed by the consumption of ayahuasca, where the liminal passage is finally crossed into that moment of purging. The doors of interspecies communication are opened at this point, as the human is in a hygienic state that the plants, as entities with preferences in their own right, are able to exist and work in a more comfortable manner. As I come back to time and time again in my work in the Amazon, and also my academic readings of other scholars of traditional knowledge, a notable mention, of course, is Richard Katz and his work with Indigenous Fijians and Mark Plotkin in Suriname, is that the plants serve as agents of transmitting knowledge, and of course this is amplified when they're in an environment through which they can be heard. Dieta is the extension of this process. So like before, I'm going to read out another vignette, this time about my experience with Dieta. So once again, if you feel comfortable to do so, I invite you to close your eyes. We'll take a deep breath. Some of my joints became inflamed and bruised. With the amount I was ingesting and the dieta of the root, I was genuinely worried that a bone would protrude out at points. Oh well, I'm here now. Time to ride the wave. All my previous injuries flared up. Meniscus tear from 2012, soccer injuries, anything and everything. Dark purple bruises under my skin, bumps appearing from nowhere. Under my ankle joints, I could feel little insects working under my skin. Oh God, I hope this isn't another jungle parasite. Keep riding the wave. hours before the ayahuasca ceremony, without having taken Sanango that day or the day before, the Sanango woke up in my system. Need water. I was used to the signal by now, and as I drank my water, the Sanango roared through my body. My body was hot at this stage. More water, more water. I drank and drank as it came louder and louder. Tidal waves of electrical current flowed my body until I finally reached the experience I had heard about and the reason many don't want to die at the root. My bones felt like they were going to split open, my head crack, my teeth shatter. I was already here and there was no going back. I'm also used to this experience by now from other psychedelics and sensory deprivation experiences. Breathe and let it pass. Can't do anything about it anyways. The Sanango thundered up until the ayahuasca ceremony. It knew that they'd be meeting ayahuasca soon and it was ready. I invite you to come back and we'll unpack that experience a bit more. So dieta, in its essential form, is a ritualized process of communicating with a plant entity. I'm not referring here to the extrapolated definition of a food diet before a ceremony. Dieta requires a prolonged period of food and behavior restrictions, namely no salt, no sugar, no fat, no spices, no alcohol, is the baseline dieta, with some variations on certain foods, temperature control, and more depending on the plant. Usually following a purgative of sorts, with ayahuasca or another plant. There are also restrictions on sexual activity, extending to being in the vicinity of others who have recently engaged in sex. Dieta invites a reconsideration of what we consider to be consumption, as it is not even the animal itself that is considered to be clean or unclean, rather it is what the animal ingests that determines whether or not it is suitable for this profound ritual of transformation. If we return back to cleaning the human body, we can consider that perhaps by purifying what is put into the body during the dieta, turns the human to a food of sorts that is suitable to be ingested by the plant being consumed, similar to the cordyceps mushroom infecting the ant. In Roberto's version of dieta, he integrates the plant into the body of the person in a final ayahuasca ceremony, just one, and his dietas are standardized at 1 month per plant. In other dietas I have partaken in with other maestros, regardless of the duration of the dieta is split into 2 parts. The first is drinking the master plant constantly, morning and night, and the second is integrating the plant with near back-to-back ayahuasca ceremonies. Regardless of which way the dieta is enacted, they serve the same function of facilitating interspecies communication, and the ayahuasca is used by the maestro with a different set of ikaro, that is the ceremonial songs and the language of the plants, to integrate the plant with the body. Depending on the variation of dieta taken, that is, whether it is a soft dieta with minimal salt and sugar or heavy dieta with no salt and sugar, the plant is understood to live permanently within the subject following a successful dieta. This brings into question the permeability of our bodies and the potential of dieta to cause bodily alterations, a topic that both Evhena Fouteau and Jeremy Nabi discuss in great depth. As we have traced to this part so far, dieta is a crucial practice in Amazonian traditional knowledge systems as it allows the subject to modify their body with plant entities. It is a heavy ritualized process, meaning that from start to finish, the ritual container is tactfully managed by negative rites to maintain the human in a state of hygiene to receive the teachings and integrations of the plant. What dieta has shown us through negative rites, which is the removal of an element for the successful completion of the ritual, is similar to what anthropologist Mary Douglas would say, where there is dirt, there is a system. As I noticed both with my experiences in dieta and also with sensory deprivation tanks, as this too involves the stripping of noise, when we strip away distractions, more subtle teachings are able to come true. This, of course, holds more weight with plant entities as their form of communication is not as loud as the humans, and therefore requires more delicacy when the human is navigating the interspecies connection. In the past, ethnographers have described dieta as a taboo, a way of making sense of a chaotic world, and whilst it does bring structure, this perspective misses the fundamental potential of ritual to function as a way of tangibly mitigating harm. So recent scientific research, such as that by Ed Fresca and Guerrero Esteban, show the molecular effects of violating the dieta, specifically in regards to tyramine that is present in some of the restricted dieta food. Taking the field site seriously, that is, not attributing rituals and practices solely to taboo because they do not fit neatly into Western epistemologies, misses the potential of scientific perspectives to provide additionalistic insights into traditional knowledge, a branch of research ethnobotanists Glenn Shepherd and Lewis Daly are exploring. Aside from the dieta having physical effects, rituals cognitively allow for profound shifts to happen in a safe and contained manner. There are distinct start, middle, and closing points, mirroring the three-stage rite of passage by Van Gennep, giving the subject structure and guidance. In the case of Amazonian traditional knowledge, I was initially amazed by the ritual literacy of the maestros in their navigation of altered states of consciousness. Having an expert, of which the benchmark is usually 3 to 5 years of training, allows the subject to relax into the ritual container, which in turn allows for more profound transformations to the sense of self to actualize. So dieta is a fascinating epistemological call to how we approach altered states of consciousness and interspecies connection. I was especially inspired by Luis Eduardo Luna's 1986 doctoral dissertation in my studies on dieta, and to understand exactly how this process is situated within rites of apprenticeship. In his 2018 conference paper, Luna analyzes ayahuasca as an epistemological wildcard. And now my question is, what about dieta, the process that holds these profound transformations and interspecies mergings? Dieta pushes beyond human teachers. It situates plants as active transmitters of knowledge, and dieta is the process through which us humans learn how to listen to the plants, an analysis I undertook for my honours dissertation. Where my understanding of apprenticeship sits now is that it's about developing a connection with plant entities through numerous ritualized processes of exchange, which anthropologist Rachel Dolmatoff discusses in great depth in his work with the Tucano of Colombia. The maestro's role in this is to facilitate this relationship. They use their literacy on how to communicate with plants to establish the connection between the neophyte and plant entities through this process of dieta. Because of this, dieta encourages us to cross what Santos describes as the abyssal line, that is, what we consider to be evidence and what we consider not to be. What dieta shows us is that the transmitters of knowledge can be more than human entities and pushes us beyond anthropocentrism. Dieta also shows us that learning is embodied. That is, there is a practicality to the process. The subject, enduring a process of dieta, embeds the plant within their system, which pushes beyond cognocentrism and taps into what Evgenia Foucault calls the technologies of the body. Lastly, dieta provides a crucial insight into the function of altered states of consciousness, specifically ayahuasca, and we can get even more specific about the alcohol compositions of ayahuasca, that is, teipathine or harmine and dimethyltryptamine. Dieta tickled the peripheries of what I believe to be possible with human consciousness and existence, tethering to the realms of the DNA alterations as documented by Jeremy Narby and beyond. In an age of increasing intelligence, whether that be from plants, psychedelics, and even artificial intelligence, we need to improve our interspecies literacy for successful integration and optimization, and dieta is a powerful tool to learn how to do this. So, in this presentation, we've been on a journey through processes of purification, protection, and plant communion. The key points that we have covered are the species threshold between plants and humans that is crossed in liminality. This is enhanced and extended through the process of dieta, that is the maintenance of a clean bodily system and intake of plant matter following the moment of purging. And dieta shows us that the function of ritual is quite literal, and that this process isn't necessarily deduced to supernatural belief or taboo, rather it has tangible physical effects and physical repercussions. Because of this, dieta serves as a call to expand systems through which knowledge is derived and what we consider to be evidence. As we increase our interspecies communication abilities through processes like dieta, This literacy can also be applicable to communications with other forms of intelligences, such as artificial intelligences, other psychedelics, and beyond. Due to the time constraints of this presentation, I have not explored when rituals go wrong, which is a fascinating area of subject area altogether, and the work of Hirschin. This perspective in reverse shows us that necessary orders, structures, and serve a vital function for the successful enactment of a ritual. So thank you very much for your time and attention in this presentation, and I welcome your questions in the question time.